Hi, Pro-Life Jen. It's Kristen Hawkins, and welcome to this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. As you know, we are in the abortion crimes series. I'm so excited to be bringing these very special shows to you. Today, I have a very special guest, a good friend who I've known for a number of years in the pro-life movement, Mark Crutcher, the founder and president of Life Dynamics Incorporated down in Denton, Texas. Mark has done a number of investigations over the years, and I think you could probably classify him as the original undercover investigator of the pro-life movement, going undercover, showing how the abortion industry was selling the parts of children they abort, how they were allowing sexual predators to get away with their crimes and shepherding young women into an abortion facilities, Planned Parenthoods and other abortion facilities without those sexual crimes, statutory rapes, sexual assaults ever being reported. A lot of folks within the pro-life movement have learned a lot from Mark over the years. I think one of the things he's most proud about is he and his team being labeled as the CIA of the pro-life movement by a New York newspaper not long ago. You probably have seen his work around. One of my first books I remember reading in a pregnancy center when I was 15 was called Line 5, written by Mark and his team. Went undercover into the abortion industry, showing the misdeeds of the abortion agents. It's Father Frank Pavone's very famous line of "You can't practice vice virtuously," and that's exactly what Mark and his team showed in Line 5. These abortionists, they're killing children every day, but they're also harming women. They're not paying their taxes. It really shouldn't be surprising to us. His most recent investigation that you all have probably heard about is Maafa 21, MAAFA 21, where he uncovered the really eugenic roots, the racist roots of the abortion industry. So we have a lot to talk about today, as you can see. I'm a big fan of Mark and his work. So Mark, thanks for joining me today. What's going on at Life Dynamics right now?
Well, first off, it's nice to hear from you again. We haven't talked in quite a while. But yeah, there are a lot of things going on at Life Dynamics. We are in the process of moving, and we'll be making once this move is over, if I live through it. And there's nothing in the world more miserable than moving.
That's
but,
true.
I told Tulane last time we built a house in 2000. And when we moved into that house, I said, "This is it. The next move you make will be with your next husband, because we're not doing it." But anyway, she hadn't dropped me yet. We just had our 50th wedding anniversary. So that's a big thing that's happening at Life Dynamics. But we've got some new things. I don't really want to talk about them before we launch them.
But holding true to your CIA of the pro-life movement mantra. You don't want to talk about until you launch them. So you can't even give us the goods.
No, but we've got some things planned I think are going to be pretty cool. I think one of the things we need to do, Kristen, is we need to return to our roots in the pro-life movement. And what I mean by that is in a lot of ways, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody else. We've been as guilty of this as anybody. The movement's gotten too corporate, and it never was intended to be that. It was always a grassroots movement of people that just ordinary people that were fighting abortion. They didn't need a giant mailing list, and they didn't need TV shows and podcasts and all this stuff. And those things are all good communication tools to use, but they can't become the central theme of the pro-life movement.
Right.
We also need, and I know that you agree with me on this, we need to return to our roots in the sense that we oppose abortion, period, across the table. No compromise, no exceptions, no apologies. That's always been our motto here at Life Dynamics, as you know. And we have, and a lot of times you can look around other pro-life groups and see that they've kind of drifted away from that. And it's not that they're bad people, it's just that they think that compromise is the way to win more people into the movement. And that's totally untrue. When people hear you say that the unborn child is a living human being, but then they see you willing to compromise, they don't have credit. You don't have credibility with them. You lose credibility with those people. And as long as you stick to the pure 100% pro-life position, you never have to apologize for anything. You never have to explain your position. It's crystal clear. And the crystal clear position is that an unborn child at any stage of its existence, from the moment of fertilization onward, is a living human being. It's no different than a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 50-year-old or a 70-year-old. And we've got to get back to pushing that message and doing it more aggressively. But we also have to craft our approach to the modern world. And as you know, we produced a television show, and you were a co-host on it for some time, called Life Talk. We started that in the early 90s. And for 20 years, it was basically the way the pro-life movement communicated. We had every pro-life organization represented in the country. We had all the leaders of the pro-life movement were on Life Talk at one time or another. And we dealt with every kind of subject that you can imagine. You mentioned earlier that we were the group that came up with that exposed the trafficking in baby body parts. We actually revealed that on a Life Talk edition. So, but time came, and it was really hard for me to accept that the era of Life Talk had passed. People weren't watching DVDs anymore. If you couldn't get your, I'm sorry.
I don't even think I have a DVD player, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird the way technology changes nowadays, Kristen. Something new comes out, and it's the Super Godzilla Belchfire 5000 latest thing, and 6 months later, you're throwing it away because it's been superseded.
Yeah, I think that's what your point is well taken about getting back to our roots in the pro-life movement too, because you have to realize these tools that we have, podcasts and social media, they are simply tools that we use to communicate, but they are not our strategies in which we seek to accomplish our goals.
And if we use those tools to broadcast a compromised message, we went backwards, not forwards. And so it's very important that we are constantly watching out to make sure we're not slipping backwards, because I've seen that happen a lot of times.
Yeah, and I think I actually did a podcast not long ago about this, and especially now we're looking at a post-Dobbs America where, abortion's going to, depending on what the Supreme Court, and we never know how the Supreme Court's going to rule, if they uphold the Mississippi abortion law that bans abortion at 15 weeks, the conversation will be on first trimester abortions. And we have to be very careful because so many in the movement have focused on these late trimester abortions. And we haven't, I don't think, given equal time to the embryo, the zygote, the fetus, whatever you want to call the child in the womb in the first trimester, and make that case to the American public as to why that child in the first few weeks of life is just as equally valuable, and why an abortion on that child at 5 weeks is just as equally horrible as a child at 30 weeks. And because we're looking at an era where second and third trimester abortions very soon can be made illegal. And, with the abortion industry, Mark, what they're coming up with, everything they're doing in chemical abortion, their goal is to get the abortions all in the first trimester and at home so that they don't have to convince an abortionist to do them. But I think it's important, and why I really wanted to have you kind of come on and kind of educate people about what you're doing at Life Dynamics. But I just remember when I was working at the pregnancy center when I was 15, one of the first books I picked up was Line 5. I liked the color. You're a great marketer. It was green and black and green. It looked scary. And I was like, what is this? It looked, out of place at a pregnancy center where everything was like pink and hearts and purple roses and flowers. But can you tell viewers why you wrote Line 5 and what you uncovered? Because I think it's a book that everyone in the pro-life movement, every activist starting out, really needs to read.
Well, I was discouraged by hearing a lot of people in the pro-life movements making statements or taking positions that made it appear that the provision of abortion is like the provision of any other healthcare activity. First off, abortion is not healthcare. For abortion to be healthcare, a woman would have to be healthier after an abortion than she was before, and that's not physically not true. That's scientifically untrue. But I think that there was a lot of people before I wrote Lyme 5 who perceived that a woman going into an abortion mill was entering the same type of facility that they entered when they went to their OBGYN or to their GP or whatever. They had the flu or they took their kid in for a checkup, and their perception was that the abortion industry was just that. They happened to be doing a bad procedure, but that's the way the abortion industry operated. It was the abortion industry just wants you to believe that it's just another medical environment. Nothing could be further from the truth than that. And I released Lyme 5 in 1996. And I've had a lot of people say to me, we've sold over 108,000 copies of it. And my understanding is it's the #1 selling book in the history of the pro-life movement. Dr. Wilkie, who I think most people thought his book was, he told me that we had sold more Lyme 5s than he had sold of his books. But that's beside the point. The point is that we've educated a lot of people about the fact that this environment is not like any other medical environment. And kind of like like what Father Frank always says, about doing a non-virtuous thing virtuously. My take on that was you can't do a wrong thing the right way, and that's the situation with abortion. And so it's very important that all the new people that come into the movement realize this, because they come in listening to the pro-aborts tell them that this is just a standard medical environment where pregnancy terminations are performed. And the point I want to make to people is, I've had people say, well, you wrote that book in 1996 or you released it in 96. Surely things have gotten better. No, things have gotten worse. Everything that we talked about in Lyme 5, everything is worse today than it was in 96 when we released the book. Every single thing we look at is worse. So don't think that these people have cleaned up their act. And I even had people in the pro-life movement criticize me at the time that I released Lyme 5 and saying, look, what you're causing to happen here is the abortion industry to clean up their act, and that'll make them harder to deal with. And I always tell them, don't worry about it. They cannot clean up their act. There's no right way to do a wrong thing. They can't clean up their act for a variety of reasons. But everything that's happening, that we talked about in Lyme 5 is worse today than it was then.
What were I just remember when I was reading Lyme 5, you had chapters of, medical issues that women, near-death experiences women had. I think there was a chapter on the finances of some of these abortionists and how they don't, surprise, surprise, someone who kills babies doesn't pay their taxes. What were some of the most surprising things that you found when you were doing the research? And by the way, how did you find out all this stuff that the abortion industry was doing?
At the time, I had 5 people on staff doing nothing but research for that book. And so we were delving into places that most pro-life groups never went into. But as far as the thing that surprised us, the medical things, the extreme injuries, the strange injuries that you'd have in the abortion industry, that didn't surprise us so much because we had already been seeing that stuff in the kind of work that we do. We were bringing a lot of malpractice cases against the abortion industry, and so we would see these things. But there's one chapter in Lyme 5 that when I laid out the original outline for the book, this chapter wasn't even in there. We didn't know it existed, that this problem existed. But as we researched this, we found this was more and more common. And so finally we put a chapter in there, and the chapter is called The Canned Hunt. And what this is about is the number of women that get raped and sexually assaulted in abortion clinics. And when you tell people that, they say, no, it's like any other medical environment. A doctor wouldn't do that. And if he did, he'd wind up in prison within hours. That's not the way the abortion industry works. And it is very common for women to be raped and sexually assaulted in abortion clinics. And we have since I wrote line 5, we have done follow-up investigations on that, and that's a problem that's still going on today. You've got practicing abortionists in this country right now who are in business right now who have been accused and in some cases convicted of sexually assaulting patients. And we have on our website the results of a later study that we did on that subject, and we name names and we tell you where we got the information, what police records, what autopsy records, whatever, where we got the information from. But that's something that most people don't think about. Mm-hmm. And I've had people say, well, why would a woman get raped in an abortion clinic? And the answer to that's very simple. First off, I think we would both agree that you have men with very sketchy morals working in these places. They also are dealing with patients, the vast majority of whom can't tell anybody where they are. The vast majority of women having abortions are, one of the motivations for it is to hide either the pregnancy or their sexual activity or their pregnancy or their whatever that they're trying to hide from somebody else. Sometimes it's a mother or father or a husband or whoever it might be. If an abortionist finds out he's talking to a 15-year-old girl and they ask in the question and answer session up front, the so-called counseling that they give, if they ask her if she's talked to her parents about this and she says, oh, no, I can't talk to my mother and daddy. My daddy would kill me if he found out about this. He knows that whatever he does to her, she can't report it. And the analogy that I often draw on this, Kristen, and I'm sure you remember us talking about this when you were on Life Talk, it's like a married man who goes to a prostitute. If she robs him, he's not telling anybody. He can't afford for anybody to know where he is and what he's doing. And these women in these abortion clinics are in that same exact position. So you've got a man with very sketchy morals, with total control over a young, and remember, all these women are of childbearing age, so they're relatively young, over a young female who can't tell anybody where she is or what she's doing. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what the possibilities are there. And we have documented this. This is not a theory. We've documented it.
Wow. Have you ever seen, so when you guys put together Line 5 documenting these sexual assaults that were going on, the women who are getting maimed, hemorrhaging, I guess, have you seen any positive outcomes where pro-life activists have been able to take your all's research at Life Dynamics and use it to put public pressure on officials who, I don't know, should be at least inspecting abortion facilities to, just like how they inspect veterinary clinics and hair care salons? Have you seen those outcomes from this investigative work you've done?
Well, we've seen outcomes from it, but not in that way. What we have found is that most bureaucrats or elected officials don't want to touch the abortion industry. It is the third rail of American politics or American culture, and they don't want to get near it. So you can go to them, and I have done this, you can go to them with absolute irrefutable proof that's undeniable in a secular environment. In other words, it's not something the pro-life movement came up with, and show them this, and they won't move on it. They won't do anything about it. You have abortion clinics operating right now, as you know, Kristen, in this country, who are operating under circumstances that you would not allow a vet clinic to remain open, but yet we will send women into these places. Now, I said we have seen some results of the stuff that we've done, but not in that way. The way we have seen results is from CPC counselors and from sidewalk counselors in front of abortion clinics who will take our information. I have got pictures of people standing in front of abortion clinics holding a Line 5 and telling this girl, wait a minute, before you go in there, you need to know this. If this happens, you need to know about this. So we have seen a lot of that, and we have had reconnaissance women call back into our office who said that they were going to have an abortion. They were shown this information on the sidewalk as they were going in and changed their mind and now have a child. And the child's the center of their life. I got a call just yesterday from a crisis pregnancy counselor in Jasper, Texas, who told me that I had helped her about a year ago with the patient that was that they were talking to, with the girl that they were talking to, who was adamant about having an abortion. Her mother was adamant about it. Her aunt was adamant about it. They used some information that we had given them and turned it around, and the baby was born yesterday or day before yesterday. And so we get those kind of calls, and I'm sure you do too. And those always kind of spur you on. And sometimes you wonder, are we making a difference here? If we save one baby, we're making a difference.
Absolutely. You absolutely made a difference in my life and in the life of so many other pro-life activists who awakened us to the gory reality. It's not what the abortion industry says, what happens behind those closed doors. Can you talk a little bit about Douglas Carpent? There hasn't really been a lot of press about what he had done. I know when the Kermit Gosnell case was in Philadelphia, I know pro-lifers there in Texas, and you're in Texas, we're talking about Carpent and his abortion business there in Houston. Can you tell people who he was and what he was doing there in his abortion practice?
Yeah, well, I'm sure as you've seen the video probably of our interview with 3 of his employees, and this was when the whole thing of Gosnell doing abortions on babies that were born, babies born alive, and then they kill them outside the womb. And these 3 women came forward, and we did an interview with them. And you can go on YouTube, if you just go type in "babies born alive daily," you'll come up with our interview that we did with them. And these women were saying this was a common occurrence, almost a daily occurrence, where they would have babies born alive, and that he would kill them outside the womb. And he, I won't go into the more graphic things that he did, but some of the things that he did, he would twist their heads off, or he would push his thumb into the soft spot of the baby's head. And these are 2 of the ones that I can talk about versus some of the others that are just too graphic for people to stomach. But he was killing these babies outside the womb, and they were calling them big baby abortions. They're talking about babies that weigh 6 or 7 pounds, and that it takes an hour to kill one of these babies in the womb because they're so big, and trying to get all the pieces out and so forth. And one of the things that we found out during that interview, and by the way, almost 1 million people have watched that interview on YouTube. And the interesting thing is, YouTube has a counter on there that tells how many people watch. And it got up close to 1 million. It was like 997, and we were watching it every day, and it was going up, 1,000 a day or 800 a day or something like that. And we were just waiting for it to go over 1 million. Then we go on there one day, and all of a sudden it's down to 976, and now it's back up to about 982. And they're for whatever reason, they're clearly manipulating their algorithm so that it doesn't go over 1 million. For some reason, they don't want that video going over 1 million, and I don't know why, but anyway, that's what's happening. But
is he still committing abortions?
I'm sorry?
What happened to Douglas Carpent? Does he still commit abortions?
Right now, we understand he's out, but not because of anything that was revealed here. But one of the things that we did stumble across, and I was surprised I hadn't thought about this before, but these women were telling us how, how occasionally we will hear of a situation where a baby is found in the bathroom of a McDonald's or the bathroom of an airport or something like that, and a mother can't be found nowhere around. Excuse me. They started telling us about instances they saw like that among patients that they had put laminaria in and were supposed to come back the next day for the abortion that never came back.
Oh my gosh.
And they said you could go on the news at night and see, and this is in Houston, they said the Houston police reported that, a late-term baby was found in the bathroom of a McDonald's, and they can't find the mother. They don't know where she is or anything. And they were joking. They said, we always knew who it was. It was somebody that we look at our records and we find somebody we put laminaria in to expand her uterus so she could come back the next day. And all of a sudden she's not coming back, but there's a baby who appears in the bathroom of a McDonald's. She said, we knew who that was, but we're not going to say anything. They're not talking about that. But we see this occasionally. And I've often thought if we had the resources to do an investigation to where we could go, we could probably find those people sometimes, go find them and ask them, did you go to a late term abortion clinic and have laminaria inserted before this happened? And I think we'd find a very high percentage of them did, because there's really no reason, if you think about it for a minute, for a woman to if she's pregnant and she inadvertently gives birth in a McDonald's parking lot, that she's not going to say something or go to the hospital. There's really no reason for that other than the fact that she's trying to conceal it, which points to abortion.
Mm-hmm. That's unbelievable. And it's unbelievable that remember when that video came out with the 3 workers who worked there with Douglas Carpin, kind of these whistleblowers, it wasn't on the national news. It didn't get covered. It was, Kermit Gosnell's trial got covered because he was, before a grand jury. And the only reason that got coverage was because pro-lifers started to make a big stink. And I think some reporters, there was Kirsten Powers, a Democratic kind of operative, kind of stumbled upon it and wrote about it. And I remember the USA Today and kind of said, this is crazy that no one is reporting this murder case. And she said, I'm pro-choice, but we should be talking about this, that even as a pro-choice woman, this offends my sensibilities that there are these predators out there, i.e. abortionists, doing this to women. But I remember the Douglas Carpin case and the undercover work you guys did and the whistleblowers that you had come out never really got covered. What do you think we should do in the pro-life movement, pro-life activists should do for how do we get this message out, especially in an age where, we can't rely on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube to keep our channels up, to not shadow ban us, to allow us to even spread the message. I know we're constantly saying, sign up for our email list, sign up for our texting list at Students Life, because at any moment they can shut us down and we won't be able to communicate with you on social media. So you can't, what do you think we should be considering and looking for? How do we promote and get the message out? Because as you said, these stories are getting worse.
Yeah, they are getting worse because the abortion industry knows that they're pretty much insulated from any legal problems or PR problems by the media. The media totally refuses to cover this stuff. You're not going to tell me that if that were any other environment except abortion, they wouldn't be covering it. You'll never convince me of that. You're a liar if you try to make that argument. So that's a challenge that we have to face, and it's a challenge we're going to have to face in the future, because we've always complained about the bias in the media. Well, the bias in social media is just as bad. So we have to learn how to work around that. But I want to make a point, going back to something you and I talked about a moment ago, about returning to our roots and staying on the pure pro-life message. One of the things, and I warned about this even when we did the video with the 3 workers in Houston from Douglas Carpin's office, I started hearing even pro-lifers coming out and saying, oh my God, they're killing living babies. A 5-week-old baby's a living baby. We're falling into a trap right there. Because that allows the radical pro-aborts like Kirsten Powers that you talked about. Don't be deceived by this woman. She's not upset by this. She just recognizes the PR problem. And so she's trying to get ahead of the PR problem. It's damage control. But what we do is we play into their agenda. When we come out here and say, look here, Carpin's causing these babies to be born alive and intact, and then he's killing living babies. Well, he'd have killed them inside the womb. They're still the same living baby. But we're falling into the trap of buying into the pro-abort's argument that there's a distinction between, say, a 6-week unborn baby and a 26-week unborn baby, when there isn't a difference. There is no moral distinction between those 2 babies. So we've got to be very careful about the rhetoric we're using here. And the argument that I was making is that not that Carpin was killing living babies, because he was already doing that, even if he does a first trimester abortion, but that this confirms that he's killing living babies. It doesn't. So what we're talking about here is location. We're not talking about the morality or the science behind this. We're just talking about location. If the baby's here, you can kill them. If the baby's over here, you can't. Well, that's not the pro-life position. Our position should be that if he's only doing first trimester abortions, he's killing living babies. And what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that these pro-lifers are consciously thinking about this, but subconsciously that's what they're doing, is they're confirming the pro-abortion position, that there's a distinction between a 6-week baby and a 26. There's not.
Yeah, we're giving preference to older children versus younger children because they look more like the children we took home from the hospital. They
look more like us.
Yep, that's right. That's exactly right. So let's shift gears and talk about Ep.120. We try to get all Students for Life groups to show this video on campus, certainly use it in their group meetings to educate pro-lifers about the origins of the abortion industry. It's amazing. I mean, the amount of information that you get in this one documentary. I mean, I've had to watch it several times, and every time I watch it, I still find something new that I needed to know 5 years ago about the abortion industry. What turned you on? Like, how did you discover this? Okay, Charles Darwin's cousin. Just where did all this come from?
Well, I had known for years, as most people in the pro-life movement had known, that the origins of the abortion Holocaust in America was the eugenics movement. Yeah. But it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to prove it. So what we decided was we would commit the resources that we had at the time to this documentary. And so we started researching it. We did over 3 years research on this documentary because we wanted to make sure that we weren't saying anything that the pro-aborts could sink their teeth into and say, oh, that's a lie, or that's not true, or that never happened. So we made absolutely certain that we did that. And what we did was we started with current times and started going backwards and looked to see what led to this, what led to this. In other words, when we did X, what caused X to happen? And we kept on going backwards. And very quickly, one of the most surprising things we discovered was that the original pro-life groups in this country were not National Right to Life or American Life League, or certainly not Life Dynamics or Students for Life. It was what were considered the radical 60s civil rights groups, the Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam, the people like Stokely Carmichael. They had recognized early on that abortion was being pushed as an instrument of Black genocide. They knew that already, as did people like Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson used to be hardcore pro-life. He came out here and called for a total constitutional ban on abortion, humanity, the personhood for the unborn child. He demanded that happened. And he made the statement. He said, it's very interesting that the very moment when Blacks started demanding their civil rights, all of a sudden, white liberals are calling for the legalization of abortion. He was the one who first picked up on that. Of course, the problem was he later on decided he wanted to be president, and he was going to run as a Democrat, and the Democrat Party was already owned by the abortion lobby. So he changed. So 1 year, literally, he was saying the greatest civil rights cause of our day is the right to life of the unborn. A year later, he was saying the greatest civil rights of our day, cause of our day, is the right to abortion. That's how he changed. And it happened overnight. And others did the same thing. But some of them stuck to it. But what we found was that these were the original anti-abortion groups in America. And it went back into the late 50s, because what had happened was the eugenics movement in America started out, and when we finally quit, we were all the way back to the days before the slavery was outlawed. And what we discovered was that when it became obvious in America that slavery was doomed at some point, I mean, our two closest neighbors, Canada and Mexico, had already outlawed slavery. Our big trading partners, England and France and other European countries, had already outlawed it. So we were the last holdout, and it was obvious that it was going to die out. When that happened, you had these rich industrialists who had made billions of dollars on the backs of slaves, now worried that they were going to lose all that money when these 4 million slaves were freed and put into the economy without the ability to support themselves. So they started looking for ways to get rid of the slaves that they had made billions of dollars on. They looked at colonization, which was to send the slaves back to Africa. That wasn't going to work. You couldn't put 4 million slaves on ships. Most of them were born in America anyway. You couldn't send them back to a country they'd never been to. Then about that same time, Charles Darwin had written the Origins of Man and started talking about his racial agenda. His cousin was a man named Francis Galton. That's Charles Darwin's first cousin. He came up with the term eugenics. The term eugenics did not exist before Francis Galton invented it. And it was a way to get rid of blacks, assuming that colonization wouldn't work. And they started trying various ways: forced sterilization, forced birth control, forced sterilization became the eventual thing that they went to back in the 1950s. And you had eugenics boards, practicing eugenics boards in 31 states at that time. And a lot of them were affiliated with Planned Parenthood, operating out of the same offices. When the Supreme Court and federal courts started saying, no, you can't have sterilization, forced sterilization. They were requiring sterilization for people on welfare. They were requiring sterilization for people who were convicted of crimes. They were requiring forced sterilization for all kinds of people. And by the way, they were almost always black. The court started ruling that this was unconstitutional. And when they lost forced sterilization, the American eugenics movement, of which Margaret Sanger was a member, she was a member of the American Eugenics Society. That's when they started calling for the legalization of abortion. And that's when these civil rights groups began to be suspicious of some of the people they were aligned with and said, wait a minute. A year ago, you had no interest in abortion and we were saying that abortion was murder and we can't do this. Now sterilization's going away and all of a sudden you're calling for abortion. And we've done research into this and they have specifically targeted, and we proved it. You can go online and read our documents on this. We have proven that they have targeted the Black and now Hispanic communities to have a disproportionate share of the abortions in this country. And
there's economists they just did a amicus brief on this. Like there was an economist, a group of over 100 economists. I don't know if you saw this. Was reading it this morning on the airplane. Over 100 economists wrote a amicus brief for the Dobbs v. Jackson case, and it was interesting because they actually said that abortion has overall improved the arc of Black women's lives. Like it is literally a eugenics brief in support of eugenics, but nicer.
It's obscene, and
they're saying it hasn't gone away.
Well, President Johnson, when they were looking at when the civil rights issue was big back in the mid 60s, one of the statements that he made, and we documented it and put it into MAFA 21, was that if the government would spend $5 on contraception in minority communities, that's better than spending $100 on economic development in those same communities. So which way do you think they went? And you started having one particular guy named Greenlee, who was a Planned Parenthood doctor. He was Black, and he picked up on this, and he said, why is it that in our city, the Black community has 3 Planned Parenthood facilities dispensing birth control, but the white community that butts right up against it, which is equally poor demographically, has none? Why are they focusing in on our communities? And he dropped out of Planned Parenthood and started working against them. And these are the sort of things that we document in Ma'afa 21. But there is no doubt, there is no argument that abortion was legalized as an instrument of Black genocide. I'm going to tell you right now, had slavery never existed, had slavery never come to America, abortion wouldn't be legal today. But slavery, the end of slavery, set in motion all the dynamics that we proved in Ma'afa 21 led to the legalization of abortion. And we have, to this day, we thought we would be lucky to put out 10,000 copies of Ma'afa. So far, we've put out 275,000 copies of it. Plus, it's been shown in churches and convention centers. It's been shown twice in the Capitol Visitor Center in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Millions of people have watched it. Over 1 million have watched it on YouTube for free. They can go to maafa21.com, our website, and they can watch it for free.
Maafa21.com, MAAFA21.com.
Right. And yet, despite the widespread distribution of this thing, we have never been challenged. And I have an open challenge to anyone on the pro-abortion side. You go through Ma'afa 21 and you find out where we were deceptive or where we said something that wasn't true or that we couldn't document, and we'll take it out of the Ma'afas from that point over. And I'll apologize for having put out dishonest information. We've never had one person take us up on that.
It's good. That means you've done your work. This is the man, guys. If you want to know an investigative journalist in the pro-life movement, you need to know Mark Crutcher and his team at Life Dynamics. Mark, I've got to wrap it up. I've got oodles of information. I've been taking notes, actually, of some things you said. I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Because I've got to go brush up on my Ma'afa 21 documentary, watch it, and dust off my copy of Line 5. And I hope you all will tune in to Mark's podcast and all the amazing work that they're doing at Life Dynamics. I can't wait to hear what this new project is, even though he won't tell us. So I'm going to have to stay in the loop. But thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for helping us kind of dissect a little bit more of these abortion crimes that are happening every day in abortion facilities across the country. And thank you all for tuning in and listening to this new episode of Explicitly Pro-Life Podcast. Make sure you share this season.